Welcome to My Hometown with Jim Turner. Stick around as Jim brings you the latest happenings, events, movers, and shakers in Apopka, Altamont Springs, and surrounding communities. Here's Jim.
Hey, greetings, friends around Apopka. Apopka is a city on the move. My name is Jim Turner. This is My Hometown, brought to you by your friends at 1520 WBCW. They include Nick and Mick. And let's see, we got Jeff and Pete and Bill and CJ and Lou and a bunch of other people here who are your friends on 1520 WBCW. And you have a lot of friends, and every day you come across people using the internet to market something. Now, wait a minute. Before you turn off, market something is not necessarily bad. Because you market your church. Whether you don't like to think of it in that term, you want your church to be known so that people can easily come to find out more about your church and come visit your church. You market your charitable organization, especially if you are really in need of contributions to help your charitable organization work. And if you have a business in Apopka, you want to market your business as well. But not only that, how about governmental bodies, municipalities who want to market what they have? Like, for example, here in Apopka, we have a pretty good web presence. The website is apopka.net, and a few other places as well. But there's a gentleman here who says that, well, maybe some of these entities in Apopka in general, speaking in general terms now, could do a little bit better. Let's welcome to the program John Ondo. John, how are you? What's new in Columbus? And have you had the opportunity to run into Jack Nicklaus at a Wendy's up there?
I'm surprised I haven't yet because I think he's down there in your part of the country a little bit more than he's up here now. But you actually will be seeing him pretty soon because we do have the Memorial Tournament coming up in a couple of weeks.
That's true. So did I describe you pretty well? Did I describe what you do pretty well?
We do a lot of different things, but primarily one of the it comes down to, and I think you can appreciate this, is I tell stories and basically using film and media and marketing with internet is one of the primary ways I do that. And ultimately, when we look at anything, like you were mentioning a moment ago, with churches or businesses, what's really going to give you an edge in this market nowadays is getting your message out there, and how you tell that story effectively is very critical. So that's one of the primary focuses I have with my job, which I enjoy. Now,
you are a media director for your own church, right?
Yeah, I've been involved in media. I actually started volunteering at a local Christian TV station when I was 15 years old, and so I kind of grew up with this. And unfortunately, that was more than a couple of years ago, but it was back in the 80s. But so I've kind of grown up in this niche where telling testimonies and explaining to people in a different way, which is what Christ even did in the Bible. He would tell stories, which were very effective. And the way we do that now is through media with devices like Vimeo and YouTube, being able to tell people, whether it's a story of a business or a story of somebody who's maybe been healed of cancer, or how a church is effectively reaching out to the community. This is it's really an effective way to do it.
Now, you've told stories of how people have been cured of cancer, have you not?
Yes, I have. I've always said that I've got the greatest job in the world because I just get to tell these amazing stories of how God's delivered people, how He's healed people, and in some cases there are people who are still waiting for those things, and to tell the stories of how they are waiting for maybe something to happen in their lives that they've been praying for. I think it's just is effectively important because it is a journey we are on, and not everything. Any good movie that you watch has the hero's journey, and the hero's journey has those moments where Obi-Wan Kenobi supposedly is killed, and then a moment later he comes back, and there's those ups and downs to any good story. And in our lives, it's the same way. We have our ups and our downs, and how we use our faith through that those ups and downs is, I think, an important part of that story.
That's the voice of John Ondo, who is the president and creative director of Ondo Media. You can go to his website at ondomedia.com. Ondo is spelled just like it sounds, O-N-D-O. O-N-D-O. Who did you have to pay for a nice, simple name like that?
I don't know. For a long time, it's a hard one because everybody would always mispronounce it. But it's a good old Hungarian name that you don't see around too often, and it's very easy to find a domain name then.
How can you mispronounce Ondo?
A lot of times people will think it's Hondo, like the John Wayne movie.
Yes,
so a lot of times,
yes.
No, there's no H. It's just Ondo. So that's how that works.
Or Ondo?
Undo, I've had that before as well, so yeah. Not as easy as Turner. Turner's pretty simple. That works really well.
Yes, it is. Now tell us, you tell stories, and even if you have a commercial client with a business, you tell stories?
Well, absolutely. I've got many that we've been working with. One of our mutual friends, Sarah Mosen, up in Pittsburgh. We're working with her and a gentleman named Rob Fletcher, and he's got a passionate desire to share fitness and trainers and how trainers are changing people's lives and giving people hope. So we've been working with them on a pilot program for America's Next Great Trainers, where we're highlighting some of these amazing. And I'm not a guy who works out of the gym, but I've learned so much because this $25 billion industry is really taking off, and it's doing some amazing things with people, and it's going from these large, huge, warehouse-size training centers to they're becoming more boutique. They're becoming like restaurants where each one have a little different style. One's for cycling, one's for kickboxing. And so we're telling the story of how these fitness places all over the country are beginning to really make an impact, both for the owners and the entrepreneurs starting them, but as well as the people who are coming there and losing weight and getting healthy and seeing their lives change. So that's just one instance that we've done. And I work a lot with documentaries on one of the things I love doing is preserving our America's hometowns. The small town America is kind of fading. We don't hear that much about it anymore, and I think that's kind of a shame. So I've been doing some documentaries on small town America, the smaller schools that we have in our nation still, with a graduating class of 40 that still are out there. They're doing amazing things, so we're trying to document some of those things and preserve those stories.
Now, how does it work? Somebody hires you, like, for example, a municipality would hire you to come in and do a story about their city?
Sure. A couple of examples I'm working on right now. Here in Ohio, we've got a county that's called Shelby County. They have one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country, I think it's around 4%. They have an arts council that wanted to tell the story of how Shelby County's industry and its workforce and its people have, a really unique attitude, and some of the stories behind that. They had heard about one of the films I had produced in a nearby city, contacted me and said, we would like to do a documentary-style film on this, highlighting some of those folks. So they contacted me. They got some underwriters, and we're in the process of filming interviews for that, which is amazing. We have another one for even a smaller community that's got a school that's getting ready to be torn down. They're building a new one. And, schools are personal. We all kind of flash back to those days of prom and high school, and those buildings are kind of personal, so they wanted to document this building before it was torn down and tell some of the stories of the teachers and the faculty. So again, they contacted me, and I kind of walk them through the process of, how can this be done? It can be funded a couple different ways depending on how it's produced, and it's very much everything's got to be custom. And that's one of the things I really have to do in my business is I can't just sit back and say, here's the plan, and, either do it or don't do it. I have to work with my clients to say, hey, how can we make this work? How can we make this fit in the budget? What's the best, most effective way to do this? So you got to get creative.
Interesting. Now, are you saying that it's much easier or for you to do it than let's say, somebody who is a staff member, or is it that you have a different insight? A
couple things along that line, and you're onto that there with having the experience, it's really easy for anyone to make a 3-hour-long movie. And let's all face it, if you watch something that's that long, you're going to fall asleep halfway into it. The attention span of a typical viewer is not that long. So my background of having 30-plus years in television and doing filmmaking kind of lets me come in and sit back and say, you know what, this is a good story, and this is what we need to do. And sometimes even with some of these stories we run into, it's like peeling back the onion or whatever metaphor you want to use. As you kind of get into the story, you find a hidden jewel somewhere where there's a story that nobody knew about but was uncovered in our research or in our interviews. So it's not impossible for somebody to go out and get their camcorder and start documenting. As a matter of fact, I encourage everybody, if you've got grandparents and especially the greatest generation. I just lost my father last year, and if you got time to videotape them and ask them stories, that's always a great thing to do. But to have somebody who can really craft a film to something that the mass public will watch and be interested in, you need somebody who really knows how to tell those stories and has the experience to know, yeah, this story is good, but not quite good enough. We need to pull that out, or we can do this as a half-hour film, or maybe we could break it up into 10 short segments that go on the internet. Just depends on what that subject is.
Very interesting. Somebody may say, well, wait a minute, what's interesting about this? But I'm going over in my mind, John Ondo, how the difference is that if, for example, you mentioned about Shelby County, Ohio. I think that it would be a safe assumption that your work with them, the purpose of doing the documentary was to attract the residents and other businesses, correct?
Yeah, it's going to do two things primarily, and that's, again, part of the focus, as you well know. You've got to have a purpose to whatever you do in business, film, whatever, making widgets. And one of the purposes we really want to do is we really want to pump up the people in Shelby County. It's not a gigantic county, but it's a county that a lot of times, and you probably have the same thing down there in the Orlando, Orange County areas where people don't even know what's going on. There's probably amazing things going on, but it's not communicated. So we want to be able to do that. But also, yeah, we want to attract outside people and let them know the great things that are going on there. So it does have some promotional advantages, and that's part of the purpose of what we want to do these films with. Yeah,
and what it sounds like you're saying is something that you haven't said all along in our interview here for the past few minutes. Essentially, what it comes down to is a recorded pitch. But you don't use that word, and it sounds like what the finished product does not come across as a pitch. It comes across as a documentary, which is a lot better.
True. And I mean, let's just take off all the mask for a second. Everything in media, to some extent or another, has some purpose to it. Your show, CNN, PBS, everything is produced with some ultimate purpose. Maybe it has a political flavor to it. Maybe it's trying to get you to rethink your views on some subject, which is the great thing about media. So ultimately, my hope is with some of these films is that, one, there's a lot of positive things going on, and I think for me, what I enjoy is telling the stories of, it sounds corny, but it's just the American ingenuity, entrepreneur spirit. One of the things we talked about, I was interviewing some folks in Shelby County yesterday, actually, and the low unemployment rate is partially due to everyone there has 2 or 3 jobs. Almost everybody is a farmer, and they also own a store, or they're a farmer, and they do something else. Nobody's ever hardly unemployed because they've got a couple of fallbacks, if you will, that they can go on, and it's just that's just how they live. That's how they were raised, that you do a couple of things, and if something fails, you just roll on to the other one. And I love those stories, and I think it should make the viewer think, maybe that makes me rethink about how I've been trained or how I've been taught to be successful, is that it's not something that just is handed to me, but I've got to work for it.
We're on the air with John Ondo, who is with OndoMedia.com. And time for a break, John. Can you stay one more segment?
Sure.
All right, time for a break on 1520 WBCW. 1520 WBCW. We're on the air with our final segment with John Ondo, who is the president and creative director of Ondo Media. John, what do you mean by media common sense?
Well, things get very complicated. I meet a lot of small business folks, and they say, we don't know how to handle Facebook, we don't know how to handle YouTube, and really, I just think I'm just kind of a basic, simple guy, and you have to sit back and say, where's your audience, and how can you best reach them? And, not every piece of social media that's out there works for every single business. So I always like to say, you got to just use some common sense, think about who your audience is and what's the best way to reach them with that message is.
If some entity is trying to do their own production work, such as what you do, what are the common mistakes they make?
It goes back to the old saying, content is king. And it probably a saying you've heard in radio that I remember from my broadcast days is, you make your point and you take the first exit. You don't want to drag on, and oftentimes poorly produced videos that could be done in 45 seconds, which is really a good optimum time length for social media and on the web and on your phone. 45 seconds typically isn't what I would refer to as non-professionals will make. They'll make it 3 or 4 minutes, and that's just too long. And you just got to make that point, get out, and then have a strategy to, once somebody watches your video and they go, that's interesting, they have a next step they can click and then maybe see a more detailed video on your website or somewhere else. So it's kind of that digging deep into your media strategy that we kind of encourage. So a lot of times we'll produce a 45-second video that goes on Facebook that drills you to a longer video that you can watch on a website, and then create a call to action that you can get somebody's email or find out more information.
And sometimes people have improperly used music as well.
Yes. Unfortunately, there is a lot of free music out there, and bless their hearts, that's wonderful. But it's really I was raised by radio people, so I really emphasize that soundtrack quality. So, and sometimes it's important not even to have a soundtrack. I was with a bunch of young filmmakers the other day teaching them, and I said, try to do something without any sound, because there's that sappy piano soundtrack everybody likes to use on anything sad, and sometimes it's just not necessary. So sometimes less is more. Exactly.
That's we're singing the same song here, because I tell you,
common sense I'm talking about here.
Yeah. Okay. I think that. I'll just shelve that idea. But are there examples on the internet where we can see your work?
Absolutely. Obviously, my main website is ondomedia.com. The school biographies, as we call them, we've done several of those, and we're in the process of producing a couple more, and you'll see those on the website, which we've been producing them primarily up here in Ohio, but obviously we can do those elsewhere. And that's all at ondomedia.com. And we've got actually have some clients in Orlando that we've worked with some video production and consulting. So it's always a lot of fun to help people out and just make that effective, because video is just the number one way right now on the internet to attract people to your website, whether you use it through Facebook or on your website itself. It's hot. It's the big medium right now.
All right. OndoMedia.com. ONDO Media.com. John, we thank you for being with us today. Sounds fascinating.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Say hello to Jack for me if you see him up there. All right. We'll take a break and get back to it here on 1520 WBZW.